Hello and welcome to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we are going to be learning about an artist for Art Masters. We're going to learn a little bit of history about this artist. We're going to see some slides of their work, and we're going to see a little glimpse of what this month's art project will be. Our artist today is one of the most famous, Rembrandt van Rijn. We know him by his first name, Rembrandt. He was born in Holland in 1606, and he came from a very large family. He had 8 brothers and sisters. Rembrandt decided he wanted to be an artist while growing up. He apprenticed with a local painter and quickly surpassed him in his artist technique. He became known around the town as a painter of religious themes. Even though he was successful in his hometown, he wanted to go to Amsterdam and become the most famous painter in Holland. This first one is Rembrandt in his studio. This is one of only 2 known full-length self-portraits of Rembrandt. It appears that he is about to paint, but if you know Rembrandt, he likes to dress up in many different costumes. Here, Rembrandt is dressed up with brushes and his palette and a cane to steady his hand upon while doing detailed work to his painting, called a mahl stick. That helps your hand from smearing the paint on wet oil. Rembrandt wanted to appear as a professional artist in his painting. But is he the most prominent object here? Which is larger, Rembrandt or the easel? The easel is much larger than the artist, with a very dark shadow on the back. We will learn more about Rembrandt's use of light and dark as we look at the rest of our slides. Rembrandt's teachers most likely taught him this technique. It's called chiaroscuro, the use of dark and light. This is an Italian word, chiaroscuro, and chiaro means light and scuro means dark in Italian. During his life, he created many self-portraits. Why so many of himself, do you think? Well, as a young artist, it was probably hard to afford models to sit for him. So he would look at the mirror and use himself as a model. He would make all sorts of strange expressions in the mirror. He studied his expressions because they show how people feel. This is an etching. An etching is a form of printing. It's done by drawing with a needle on a metal plate coated with a thin layer of resin. The plate is then dipped into a bath of acid. The acid will eat away the metal that has been exposed, leaving the little crevices. The plate is coated with ink, and then the ink is wiped off. The ink will remain in the crevices made by the drawing plate, and it's ready for printing, kind of like a stamp. The paper is pressed on top of the metal plate, and they are pulled through the printing press. Since it was a print or a stamp, he could make a lot. He made a series of self-portraits throughout his life, and we were able to examine the different periods, from the young successful painter to him married with his family to his later time in life. He was becoming very popular because of his incredible lifelike paintings of people. This next painting is rather shocking because of the subject matter. A doctor had commissioned Rembrandt to paint himself, lecturing other surgeons during an anatomy class. Here we have the doctor surrounded by his colleagues. The man in the hat is Dr. Tulip. The hat signifies his status in the group. Anatomy classes were so popular that the public could actually buy tickets to observe the lecture. Money from the tickets would be used to help pay for the painting. What geometric shape has Rembrandt chosen for his composition or arrangement of the men? Let's look for a shape. I'm noticing a triangle or a pyramid shape. Most group portraits are created with each person looking at the artist, or today, the camera. He wanted each person to be special, so he changed the position of each man's head. This painting also appears dramatic because he's using light and dark, or chiaroscuro, and you'll notice that the faces are all highlighted. And the direction of the light is coming from the left. And then you'll notice the darkest color are on the opposite side. The Surgeons Guild was quite impressed with Rembrandt's group portrait. He was considered Amsterdam's very best portrait artist. The next portrait is of a man in an Asian costume. When he painted this portrait, he was becoming very well known. Based off the way he's dressed and the title, we could tell this man is of great wealth. Based on his clothing, he looks very rich. They're made of silk and gold. There's beautiful embroidery. He's wearing a necklace. You'll notice he did not show detail on the entire costume. The bottom is in darkness or shadowed, so he liked to emphasize a particular area of the figure by using light and dark, or chiaroscuro. Rembrandt is also known for his historical paintings. In his time, most artists would specialize in one form of painting, but here's another religious painting. Storm on the Sea of Galilee. This is a landscape, a painting of the sea, so we'd call it actually a seascape. We can still see his light and dark areas for a dramatic effect, and we could see the ship being tossed about the sea. Do we notice any geometric forms? I'm seeing some triangles, and that big long mass, that straight line kind of cutting through the canvas, cutting it into two sections, light and dark. And if we had a magnifying glass, we could even see that Rembrandt himself is one of the men on the boat. This painting is of a religious story from the Bible and a seascape, so a little bit different than his past portraits. During the next year, a very important event would take place in his life. He would meet a wealthy young woman. They fell in love and were married in 1634. Flora was the ancient Roman goddess of flowers, gardens, and spring. Here she is adorned with flower headdress, a flower-entwined staff, and her costume was made of beautiful silk. What did Rembrandt use to emphasize her pale skin and costume? He uses the darkness, so then that light pale color really comes across as very dramatic. If you look at the man in the painting, what kind of voice would you picture him having? What do you think his job is? Well, the man in the portrait was an eloquent preacher and a religious writer. The woman in the painting is his wife. Before Rembrandt did this portrait, he had made drawings and a couple of etchings. This was a good way to get to know him and what type of personality he had. Rembrandt was inspired to show Anslo speaking intently to his wife, most likely about the Bible that is open on the table in front of him. The Bible dominates half the canvas, and there's strong lighting, so you could tell that this is the important thing in the painting. This is called a double portrait with two people. Most people could not afford a double portrait. A large painting like this was a very large painting, required a large room with high ceilings. Rembrandt became famous because of his ability to show the personalities of the people he painted. Most other artists of his time painted portraits that made people look stiff. Rembrandt's professional life was flourishing, but unfortunately his personal life was shambles. His wife had given birth to their fourth child. The first 3 children had died soon after being born. Titus appeared to be well, but it was very difficult for his wife. She died 9 months after Titus was born, leaving Rembrandt a widower with a son to raise. So he immersed himself in his painting. This is a group portrait, and let's notice, where do we see golden light? It's on those 2 men in front, and you'll notice the little girl in the back. This is actually considered the most famous of his paintings. Originally, it was titled The Company of the Captain. When the painting was completed, it was not exactly what they expected. If you had paid the artist and posed for him for many tedious hours, how would you feel if your face didn't show? Look at some of these people. Their faces are turned around. There's an arm covering someone's face. What if that was you? Now, if we look carefully at the group portrait, we'll notice there's a little girl, which is a bit odd when you're with a bunch of military men. No one can understand why Rembrandt added 16 imaginary figures to the composition and made many of them, like the little girl in white, more noticeable than the men of the company who had paid Rembrandt. When they posed, the company of men all dressed in their matching uniforms. They stood in a row and tried their best to look distinguished. But Rembrandt changed some things, didn't he? He dressed them all differently and showed everyone doing something different. He also put strange expressions on their faces. He made them look disorderly. He was apparently bored with the idea of a typical group portrait, so he decided to do something different. He chose to show them in action. Let's take a closer look at the little girl in gold. One theory about the little girl with the chicken tied to her belt is that she is a carrier to the banquet. Another is that the guard is turning out for target practice and the chicken is one of the targets. And even though the military company thought it was a little strange how Rembrandt painted this, they still hung it in the Amsterdam town hall. Rembrandt also occasionally painted landscapes. There was not a demand for this type of painting. Rembrandt's painting of the mill is named for the most prominent object in this painting. You can definitely get a mood of kind of a dark, cool, quiet, and dramatic mood. Very still, and maybe a storm on the horizon, or is it just the setting sun? Rembrandt's landscapes are known for their effects of sunlight upon the water. This seascape is very still and quiet. If you look closely at the windmill, it appears that the blades are not moving, so there must be no wind. The water is calm. His landscapes have a very mystical feel about them. At the bottom of the painting, we see a man who has lowered his sail in the waters, drifting along. On shore, we see people gathering their belongings after a day of work. They look as if they're ready to go home and rest. Our next slide is a historical painting of Aristotle with a bust of Homer. Rembrandt was quite interested in Greek and Roman history. He loved to collect old costumes and props. He used a bust, the statue head of Homer, from his collection for this painting. Aristotle lived 500 years after Homer. He was known as a great teacher and philosopher. Homer wrote epic poems about the last of the Trojan War and the Odyssey. It was believed that Homer was blind. Perhaps in this painting, Aristotle is wondering how a blind man could describe such wonderful details of adventure in his poems. All right, who remembers the term for light and darks? Chiaroscuro. So we can notice that the light makes a diagonal line from the upper left to the lower right. It lights Aristotle's face and part of the statue's head, where the other side of the painting is quite dark. In 1660, Rembrandt was not a prolific painter as he once was. Unfortunately, he still spent his money on costumes and frivolous items, and he had to declare bankruptcy. His son set up an art dealership and employed Rembrandt so he could keep painting. It was during this time that a couple asked him to paint their portraits. This is called A Woman with Pink. You'll notice she has a pink flower in her hand. And the way she's dressed is not normal clothing for her time. Ornate dress and jewelry of gold and pearls are showy, yet she seems unimpressed with her richness. If we notice, Rembrandt uses the light. Rembrandt's use of light brings our eyes to the small flower between her fingers, her pale skin and soft eyes. The small flower in her hand is a symbol of faithfulness in marriage. Rembrandt is showing us the flower symbol is more important than the pearls and jewelry she is wearing. That is why the light shines down upon the flower and not her jewelry. Our next slide is one of the last group portraits by Rembrandt. The city of Amsterdam later acquired this and placed it in the museum where it is today. This painting hangs in the city of Amsterdam, and X-rays of this painting show that it was revised several times before the guild accepted the final work. They are members of a cloth makers union, and their director asked Rembrandt to paint a group portrait. Who are the men looking at? Are they looking at the artist, the viewer? What type of feeling do we get about? Because all of the men seem to be glancing up from the work, we get the feeling that we have interrupted the meeting. Everyone is looking up to see who has entered the room. Rembrandt highlighted the men's faces, the tablecloth, and the wall. He created contrast by using black on the clothing and even the white collars against their more golden faces. They kind of look like pilgrims who settled in America that came from Europe. The Clothmakers Guild liked this because they all looked like individuals and they had different thoughts and emotions. Rembrandt painted over 60 portraits of himself during his life. We began by looking at his painting with a slide of his self-portrait when he was young and full of energy. Now let's see a portrait when he was older and tired. Here's one of his later self-portraits. He's lived quite a life filled with great joys and loves, a tragic loss of his wife and children. This is the Rembrandt who created the great portraits of men and women. He worked non-stop and could turn out a portrait every 2 weeks. Art students flocked to him. He took up to 50 at a time. Today, some of the paintings which have been attributed to Rembrandt have actually been found to be done by his students. What a remarkable artist and person Rembrandt must have been. For our art project, we will be doing light and dark contrast, just like the chiaroscuro. We'll be using a limited palette of colors, possibly white and browns, but we're really going to be focusing on that highlight and dark. So Hope you look forward to your project by Rembrandt.